Today is December 22nd, 2018, and Tevet 145779. And today's message is entitled, kind of in tongue-in-cheek, but not tongue-in-cheek. I was going for trying to sound kind of very liturgical. The birth of our Lord. And with us leaving Hanukkah not too long ago, and with our culture here in the West having Christmas right around the corner, and for some of you this is just going to be a refresher of things that you probably already know, but it's good to be reminded. I wanted to talk about our views here as to when we believe Yeshua was born, and to give reasons why. And I'm going to be referencing a handout that my mother put together years back. That actually is a compilation of other writings. So I'm going to be referencing what she referenced in her paper. Her paper is called The Birth of Yeshua the Messiah. And so just for, like I said, for some it'll be just a refresher course. So, first things first, we don't believe that Yeshua was born December 25th, but we believe that there is strong evidence, and that's the other thing. This is a very strongly, you can argue very strongly this theory. Ultimately, it is a theory because we can't prove it downright. If we could prove it downright, it wouldn't be a theory, but ultimately this is just a very strong theory. And in fact, you'll see I found one discrepancy that throws things off, just slightly, but not much. But you can there's some explanations that you can even give there. So, but this is a theory, but a very strong one. Anyway, we believe that he was born during Sukkot. December 25th is a holdover from the Roman practice of Saturnalia. And really, I've done research on both. I did research on both Christmas and Easter for a college paper a long time ago, and what I found was actually this route's much further back than Rome. It goes all the way back to the Tower of Babel. You can go all the way back to the Tower of Babel for all of this. So this is a holdover from that got basically intermixed into everything. And as you will see later on, there are also some really good arguments as to why Yeshua would not have been born during the cold months, during the time that it would have been freezing and, I'm getting ahead of myself, but you wouldn't be able to travel, which is kind of important. So we'll be getting to those a little later. There is one part of the story, however, that did happen according to this theory, and according to these calculations, that did happen during the season. And that would be the conception of Yeshua. And based on this theory and based on the calculations, and once again, very strong, when we thread everything together, it's very strong that this was the case. He most likely was conceived during Hanukkah, during the Feast of Lights. So what's interesting here is he would be conceived, so the light of the world, as we know him, would have been conceived during a Feast of Lights that runs for 8 days, and then would have been born during the Feast of Lights that runs for 7 days, which runs for 8 days if you count Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day. So you have bookmarks, you have quotations, light of the world, the 9 months of gestation. So I found that very interesting and cool. Also, Hanukkah is the rededication of the temple, and I couldn't help but think about what he said later on of, you can tear this temple down, and in 3 days I'll rebuild it. So conception, the initial building of the temple that he would one day say you can tear down, during the time of the dedication of the temple, a rededication of the temple, celebrating that. So going back to Sukkot, if Yeshua was born on the first day, then his circumcision, 8 days later, would have been on Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day. And for a little boy during this time, the 8th day in general was very important because they generally didn't celebrate the life of the child fully until the 8th day, until his circumcision. They wanted to see if he would survive long enough to make it to his circumcision. And when he did make it to his circumcision, that was considered his birthday. That was the day that he got his name. That was the day that he was acknowledged. So, Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day, literally his 8th day was the 8th day. And the 8th day, is interesting because we don't really know how to celebrate it. It's kind of shrouded in mystery. And that's the whole idea. It represents the next chapter. It represents something new, something that's going to happen. Yeshua gets circumcised on a day that represents something new is about to happen, something that you've never run into before. And this is the day we acknowledge he survived to his 8th day. Something new is about to happen. Another thing that's interesting is in Israel, Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah are the same day. The day that we celebrate the giving of Torah, the giving of the living word, is on Shemini Atzeret, on the 8th day. Once again, circumcised, the day that he became known as a son of Israel, was the same day that as a people we celebrate the Torah. And not only that, I don't know about then, but now we dance with it. And we treat it like it's a person that we're excited to see, and a person that we're excited to be with, and we don't want to leave. That's the whole idea of the celebration. So we have the living word, and then on that day, the living word. And people are all excited to be around the living word. So, I already said all that. And John 1:14, John 1:14 talks about that. Yeah. The Word became flesh. So, and tabernacled with us. So, and that's an allusion to Sukkot as well. Very good. So, how do we show that Yeshua was born during Sukkot? Now we're going to get to the actual, it's nice to say, whoa, if this happened this way, it's really cool, and here's the prophetic side of it. But how do we actually get to the nuts and bolts and say, no, here's how we prove that he was actually born during Sukkot? Well, where we have to start is we have to look at Yochanan, and when Yochanan was conceived and born. And how we do that is we have to look at Yochanan's father, who was a priest, who had a set time during the year that he served. And that's very important. And another thing that needs to be noted is that Yochanan was 6 months before, there's a 6 months difference between Yochanan and Yeshua. That's very important as well. And Scripture talks about that in Luke 1:23-27, and it says, and so it was, as soon as the day of his service were completed, Zacharias, Yochanan's father, that he departed to his own house. Now after those days of his temple service, his wife Elizabeth conceived, and she hid herself 5 months, saying, thus the Lord has dealt with me in the days when he looked on me and took away my reproach among people. Now, in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David. This virgin's name was Mary. So we have the 6 month difference there. Now, to calculate when Yochanan was conceived, we need to find out when his father, Zacharias, was serving in the temple, because Scripture pretty much makes it sound like, not to get crude, sounds like Zacharias got home from work and was like, I am so happy to see my wife. And then there was Yochanan. So the way it makes it sound is right after he got home, Yochanan was conceived. So we need to actually look at when his father would have been serving. And the service of the priests were cut up into, this paper calls it courses, you can call them duties, you can call them shifts. So you have different shifts for different priests of different households of when they would be doing what they would be doing. So we need to look and find out what house was Zacharias a part of. So when was he serving? And we can actually find that Luke 1:5. And most of these quotes that I'm going to be doing are very small, so you don't have to turn there. In the days of Herod, king of Yehuda, there was a Cohen named Zechariah, who belonged to the Aviah division. His wife was a descendant of Aharon, and her name was Elisheva. So Aviah, he was of the division of Aviah. And I'm not going to go there. I mean, you can later if you'd like. 1 Chronicles 24 divides the priests' families into 24 groups or courses, which I always found it interesting too. 1 Chronicles 24, and they're divided into 24. I think that's an interesting lineup there. 1 Chronicles 24:10 designates the 8th course as that of Oviah, the one that Zacharias belongs to. So he was of the eighth round. Now, the way that they would do it also is your responsibility was 2 weeks. But they would divide those 2 weeks, so you would have the week toward the beginning of the year and the week toward the end of the year that you would be responsible for. For this calculation, it would be the beginning of the year week that he would be serving for this calculation to work. And this is where we get into the theory part of it. We can't prove which one he was doing, but for this theory to work, he would have been working his first shift. Now, one of the things that also has to be taken into consideration is that the High Holy Days were separate from the 2-week responsibility, and the High Holy Days required all the priests because you had such an influx of people, you had so many sacrifices going on that they needed everybody on deck, everybody helping, everybody working. Well, so those days would be Passover, Sukkot, and Shavuot, or Pentecost. Zacharias' course would have been from the 27th of Iyar to the 5th of Sivan. And the 5th of Sivan, that night, is the eve of Shavuot. So he would have gone a week and then stayed a day so as to help with Shavuot. And I know you're probably not going to see it, but if you want to come look at this, and someone please remind me to put my dad's calendar back. I put my dad. Yeah, here we go. If you look, you would have him starting on, Saturday, Iyar 27, and working until and working till Sivan 5th, which is Shavuot Eve, and you can actually see that on the calendar. And so he would have worked one more day on Sivan 6th for the whole of Shavuot. And this is where we actually run into the discrepancy that I found. They say that Shavuot lasts 2 days. The only problem with that is Shavuot only lasts 2 days in the diaspora. It does not last 2 days in Israel. We're talking about Israel. Also, the rules of diaspora had not been codified by this time, so it would not have been 2 days anywhere. It would have been 1 day. So that assertion, when I found that, I was like, okay, that's not correct. That can't be correct. So it throws our little calculation off by a day. But even that, it says that he had traveled home. Who's to say he didn't take a day to get home? He's on foot or donkey back or something like that. That's not like a car. He didn't just drive down the freeway and he was home. Hey, I'm home. Okay, whatever. No, it took him a while to get home. So for all we know, it did take him a day to get home. So he would have served, taken a day to get home, got home, and he is with his wife. And for this calculation, he would have been home by Sivan 8th, which would have been 2 days, they say, traveling Sivan 7, based off of my way of looking at it, getting there at Sivan 8th.
Would that be using the Hebrew calendar?
That's using the Hebrew calendar, yes it is.
354 days.
Yeah. And so, according to the article, Zechariah would have returned home to his wife, once again, Elisheva, on the 8th of Sivan. So, 8th Sivan becomes the earliest possible date of the conception of Yochanan by Elisheva. Among the long-held beliefs that the menstrual cycle usually coincides with the phases of the moon, with most women having their most fertile period during the first week of the new moon, which also marks the beginning of a Hebrew month, and that would be the first week of the month. She could have conceived that very day. He could have come home and Yochanan was conceived right away. I mean, and then in this case, wouldn't that be God? He's like, how are we going to do all this? And he'd be like, look, you're going to get home and there's going to be a kid, you know. So, once again, Luke 1 indicates the conception occurred soon after Zechariah's return from his priestly duties. So, doubt me, she's going to get pregnant right when you get home. But now, remember, Elisheva hid herself for 5 months, and on the 6th, the angel appeared to Miriam. And assuming Elisheva conceived on the 8th of Sivan, she would have hidden herself the 5 months of Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, and Tishrei, and the first week of Chesvan. And I can actually show you on the calendar that tracks. You got 5 months there. So the angel Gabriel would have been sent to Miriam in the 6th month of Elisheva's pregnancy, or during the latter part of Cheshvan, or the early part of the month of Kislev. I think we are currently in Kislev. Kislev coincides with December, typically, and that is where you find Hanukkah, is in Kislev. What? 25. The 25 Kislev. From 2 accounts, we know that the conception took place after the appearance of the angel. So, now, once again, here we go into the whole territory of theory. It doesn't really say it was the 6th month, but when in the 6th month. With the beginning of the 6th month, middle of the 6th month, toward the end of the 6th month, we don't know. For the idea of him being conceived during Chanukah, it would be in the middle of the 6th month that the angel would have appeared, not right at the beginning. Like she said, the 25th of Kislev. Or actually, based on this calculation, would be the 24th of Kislev for that evening being Hanukkah. And for this calculation, they have Yeshua being conceived the 24th. Yeah, and so you kind of beat me there. So this would have actually been, the 24th of Kislev, would have been right when Elisheva was about to enter her 3rd trimester. And it would have been the season when Mary would have gone to live with Zacharias and Elisheva to help with Elisheva's pregnancy. So right after the angel shows up, says, you're going to have a child. That's the 3rd trimester for an older woman who's going to be bearing a child who needs help. And Mary goes and helps her in that last 3 months. And that's, we have the account of when Mary approaches her and says, the mother of the Lord. So that indicates that the conception has already happened, which further gives this idea that most likely it was during Hanukkah, because it's about to happen, it happened already. And what's interesting about all of this timing as well, another thing that kind of just shows God's hand, is Yochanan's time of birth based on this timing. Yochanan's birth, again, assuming that a conception on 8 of Sivan, Elisheva would have been during the week of Passover at full term, especially for a child born from the womb of a mother of advanced years. And Mary remained with her about 3 months and returned to her house. Now Elizabeth full time came for her to be delivered, and she brought forth a son. That's Luke 1, 56, 57. Remember that Yeshua himself identified Yochanan as having the mantle of Eliyahu. Jews even today prepare a place for Eliyahu every Passover. Passover would therefore be the most appropriate week for the birth of Yochanan, the one who bears the mantle of Eliyahu, making the 8th day of Passover the day that actually coincided with Yochanan's circumcision. Once again, with Passover, you have the day of Passover and then 7 days of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And so it would have been Yochanan's first year of life, right before his circumcision. He lived the full course of Passover and unleavened bread before being consecrated as a son of Israel. Once again, a lot of imagery here of this. This is what this man is for, is to call for sinlessness. And we talk about the matzah representing Yeshua. He is one who points to the matzah. So, now going on from that to Yeshua, exactly 6 months later, from Nisan 15, which is beginning of Passover, to Tishrei 15, the first day of Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacles, follows Passover. So you go 6 months from Passover, you've got Sukkot. If Miriam conceived on Kislev 24, the first day of Chanukah, Yeshua would have been full term in a young woman on the 15th to the 22nd of Tishrei. Again, since life is reckoned to begin after a male child is circumcised, and the child is customarily not given a name unless it survives to circumcision, either date qualifies as a birthday for Yeshua. Birthday for Yeshua. The 22nd of Tishrei, the 8th day, once again, Shemini Atzeret, would be that day, based on the 6 months between Yochanan and Yeshua. So you can either go from when Zechariah was serving and go that direction, or you can go from Yochanan and backtrack 6 months, to Yochanan to confirm where Yeshua was born. And it all starts to line up. Now, going away from the timing, from the dates and so on, another argument, and I'm sure some in this room have heard this argument, that if Yeshua was born during Sukkot, that would mean that Sukkot were being used. And that very well could have been what the Greeks mistranslated as a manger. And there's actually further evidence of this, that in Hebrew the word Sukkot describes a stable. That's actually one of the terms for a stable, or lodging place for animals, as reflected in Genesis 33:17. And Jacob journeyed to Sukkot, built himself a house, and made Sukkot booths for his livestock. Therefore, the name of the place is called Sukkot. So there is this idea that you house your animals in Sukkot, which, during Sukkot, if you were housing in something temporary that you put your animals in, it's a very humbling experience, which is part of the experience, to say this is very temporary. In fact, it's so necessary that we have to be in here with our animals because that's where we stay. Once again, it's most likely that the reason that there was only room there was because Sukkot is a pilgrim feast, which means that everyone would have been coming to Yerushalayim to serve people even from other who didn't live within the Roman Empire, possibly. So you have an influx of people entering the Roman Empire to come to Jerusalem for the feast, and the inn would have been full of people, and they would have been like, sorry, we're all out. And that is why most likely he's like, but I've got a sukkah. I've got a sukkah I'm using this year. You could stay in there, so. Now, we come to some of the arguments as to also why it wouldn't have happened during the cold months. Why it really doesn't make sense when you start laying it out that it wouldn't happen during December. It wouldn't happen during a time of freezing. Hey, slow down. Once again, people are coming to Sukkot. That would make sense. If you have people coming to Sukkot, any good leader who knows who they're leading or who they're governing over would be smart enough to go, okay, this people group, I want a census of this people group. They're all going to be converging on this one place during this time of year. Let's have a census. It makes sense to have a census during a pilgrim feast. There's no pilgrim feast in the winter months. Hanukkah is the only thing that's there, and Hanukkah is actually a traditional feast. It is not a commanded feast, therefore there is no pilgrimage. Therefore, people wouldn't be coming to Jerusalem, therefore it doesn't make sense. Once again, talking about the cold weather, why do it at a time when there's a possibility that certain peoples in certain regions would not be able to travel out of danger for their life because it's too cold? It doesn't make any sense at all. And yes, as Michael pointed out, the shepherds would not have had their flocks out in open field during the cold. They would have had them boarded up. They would have had them in a sukkah, but in a sukkah not during Sukkot. They would have had them somewhere warm. So these things don't make any sense. It makes more sense to be in the fall feasts. Yes?
Well, it's my understanding that December 25th is when the pagans
Yes.
who worship the sun god
Tammuz.
built bonfires on December 25th.
I don't know about the bonfires, but yes, 25th is connected to Tammuz specifically.
So God wouldn't share a holiday with a pagan god.
Right. Yeah.
Same with
Yeah.
Easter.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I said, I did research on that. Yeah, I agree. Yes. December 25th is specifically tied to Tammuz, which goes all the way back to the Tower of Babel. And I said I wasn't going to share this, but I guess I'm going to share this. Since this is all ultimately a strong theory, okay? Once again, there's a few little things that you just can't nail it down. I have a strong theory of my own. I need to do a little more research. Do not quote me on it. Do not say that this is fact. Constantine is a part of all of this. And there's the whole concept, and when this hit my head this past week, it blew my brain. He saw, supposedly what led him to this is he saw a cross in the sun. And what I got was God going, why would I show anybody anything in the sun? That's the thing I've been combating for eons because humanity wants to worship that instead of me. The symbol of Tammuz is a cross. And it always has been. If you look in the past, really the cross only represents something redemptive because of what Yeshua did on it. Beyond that, it's pagan to its core. So what he would have seen is the cross of Tammuz, but he would have known it as Mithra, and all Mithra did is tilt it into an X. If you look at the symbol that Constantine had, it was a symbol that looks like a P with an X. The symbol of Mithra, who was Tammuz, which if you turn it back over, it's the even cross. And then I went a little further. There are those who end up putting little crosses on their heads, on their forehead, and you can go further and be like, and then if you actually look at it, and it just all started to click of who is it that replaced Yeshua in all of the worship practices? Tammuz. It was the cross of Tammuz that he saw in the sun because Tammuz, Satan was basically, I will usurp. And that's why you have Yeshua with the sundial and Mary with the sundial in all of that. And it's because it's a complete usurpation. And I read something that basically showed that when that happened, Mithraism was still, it was dying off, but Mithraism, they said that when that happened, Mithraism disappeared. It no longer existed. And they present it like Christianity came in and defeated Mithraism. No, Mithraism found a new skin and hid. I relate it to eugenics. If you look, eugenics never went away. It's now called Planned Parenthood. So look at it. The people that founded eugenics were the same people that founded Planned Parenthood. It's the same. The same movement with a new skin. So Mithraism absorbed into that and called itself Christianity, and you had all this admixture. Once again, the cross part of it, I cannot outright confirm that that's what he saw, because I haven't done the research. The research I've done is very light on that, but it makes sense to me. It kind of, but I would not be surprised if somebody came up, well, no, that wouldn't work because of A, B, C, or D. Okay, because I haven't done enough research to confirm that. But anyway, I actually said I wasn't going to go into that. Sorry, Dad. But anyway, so yeah, the 25th is connected to Tammuz, which is connected to Babel, replaced Mary with Semiramis, the whole 9 yards. Of course, that's got me off track from where I was going originally here.
Why it's not winter.
Yeah.
Why it's not during the cold.
Yeah, why? Yeah, thank you. Census, thank you. Okay. And I was pretty much done with that section. The next part is actually something I have in this article that's just really cool. It's something that is significant, but it doesn't have to do with the timing of Yeshua's birth. It's just really neat. And that has to do with the Magi. The Magi are believed to be Parthenian mystics who lived east and north of the Euphrates at the end of the Persian Empire. Parthia was a kingdom whose power rivaled Rome in the 1st century. The royal class, from which Parthian kings were chosen by a combined vote of the Magi and the royal class, were known as King of Kings. So the Magi were those who had the authority to proclaim someone a king. Apparently, this custom carried over from the early Persian rule. For instance, both Artaxerxes and Nebuchadnezzar are referred to in Scripture by this title. You can find that in Ezra 7:12, Ezekiel 26:7, and Daniel 2:37. The Magi also believed that the blessing of Yaakov to Yehuda, that the scepter, which we just read, the scepter of rule should not depart from Yehuda, meant that even the nations, other people groups, should be ruled by the kings of Israel. These guys got it way before a lot of people got it. And we know that hasn't happened, and that was a plan for Israel, but Israel had to stay obedient, and we know what happened. But there is an ultimate fulfillment of this when Yeshua will come back. He will have the rod of rule. He is from Yehuda, and he will rule from Jerusalem all the nations. These guys got it back then before he even got here. So the scepter, ruled by the king of Israel. This belief, coupled by the appearance of the Star of Bethlehem, convinced them that a true King of Kings, selected by the hand of God, was to be found among the house of David within Judea. As a king of the Jews, Yeshua was an early candidate for the kingship in the Parthian Empire, which had always remained friendly with Yehuda, and which many scholars, including the 1st century historian Josephus, wrote, comprised the vast hordes of the assimilated northern kingdom who had escaped the Assyrian exile. So we have these men that have the authority to claim someone a king, going to Yeshua, saying king, with the belief that you're going to be the king of all. And they got it. And, which is awesome. Once again, wouldn't have been traveling during the cold months. They had to travel there. So, now, going from that, kind of linking from that to, we know that they met with Herod, who was concerned about this coming Jewish king that he wanted to stop. Herod got some information from them before God basically told them, you don't need to meet with this guy anymore. He's no good. But he got a relative idea of when Yeshua was going to be born and where. So he attacked, which then made it to where it was unsafe for Miriam and Yosef to stay where they were, and that they needed to flee. But this poses a problem. They need to come back in 40 days to dedicate their firstborn son. But God, being who He is, God was not about to let a man get in the way of His one son coming and being dedicated based on His law for Him to do His work. And what He did was He provided protection by having Herod die. And Josephus actually has a record of that. Josephus relates that Herod became very ill immediately following an act of impiety against the priesthood, at which time an eclipse of the moon occurred. This eclipse, the only one mentioned by Josephus, happened March 13th, 4 BC. Herod's death occurred about September, meaning he would have been ill for several months before dying in the fall. Once again, Sukkot is a fall festival. According to Josephus's record, the 7 days of Sukkot fall in mid-September to October, according to the Julian calendar. This means that Herod, who first grew sick in the spring of 4 BC, died after the Feast of Tabernacle and shortly after Yosef and Miriam had fled with the infant Yeshua. But they returned after Herod's death in time for his dedication in the temple when Yeshua was 40 days old, around Kislev 12. And so this further gives proof of him being born during Sukkot, because that's when Herod was alive when he was born to attack. Right after Sukkot, he would have died, and then it would have been safe for him to come back for his dedication, bolstering this idea that Yeshua was born during Sukkot. Otherwise, Herod wouldn't have been an issue, So, this is, once again, one of those things that props up this idea. Further, though, Kislev 12, the fact that they came back on Kislev 12, that's important as well. And what I find interesting is we're approaching Hanukkah again, so we have this full circle, but this doesn't have to do with Hanukkah. Well, now, first, just some few little tidbits for us. This day, Kislev 12 on this calendar, which the Julian calendar and the calendar shift on each other quite a bit. But the day they came back corresponds with the day we call in America Thanksgiving. So you could say that Thanksgiving in this nation has a link to the day that Yeshua was dedicated.
Wow.
Therefore, our Thanksgiving can be rooted in giving thanksgiving for our Messiah. What's even more interesting, once again, for that shifting dial between the two calendars, there is a belief that for some of our forefathers, the ones that began the nation, the reason they wanted Thanksgiving and when they wanted Thanksgiving was a way to celebrate Sukkot. That they were celebrating Sukkot in their own way and they called it Thanksgiving. And that's why it's kind of around the same time of year. So we have a root to his dedication, and we have a root to when he would have been born, connected to Thanksgiving, giving thanks for our Messiah. So anyway, that's kind of an aside.
And just as an introduction, Kislev 25, which is Hanukkah, was the day the Mishkan was erected.
Erected?
finally,
Oh.
And God came and dwelt
Oh.
in the Mishkan.
Okay. I don't know if everyone heard that, but
A Jewish halakha thing. But
based on it is believed that Kislev 25 when Hanukkah begins, was the day that the Mishkan was ultimately set up and the glory of the Lord rested with his people, dwelled with his people. So that would correspond with Yeshua being conceived. Just wait, he's about to dwell with his people. So, but Kislev 12, forgetting about America's calendar, with their calendar, during this presentation of the infant Yeshua in the temple, the prophecies of Simeon and Hannah were delivered to Yosef and Miriam. Those prophecies from Isaiah coincide with the readings of the prophets read in the synagogue only one time of year, the week of Kislev 12. He was there on that day specifically to have those prophecies that have been prophesied for such a long time about the coming of the Messiah. He showed up for dedication on that day. They came. It wasn't just a random, and that's the thing. Most everybody can see, oh yeah, well, yeah, they would prophesy those because those speak of the Messiah. But a lot of people miss those were the prophecies, that which was read from the prophets that week. The week that he was dedicated. It wasn't them going, hey, I got this from God, here you go. This is our reading, you're him, because you line up. And this, once again, you backtrack from Kislev 12, and that's the only week when that would have been read. So Kislev 12 is the only time that's read, and that's prophesied over him. You backtrack, it confirms he was born during Sukkot. He was conceived during Hanukkah. Yochanan was born during Passover. It confirms all of this. So you can actually work from both ends and work in and confirm that that's when he was conceived and born. And all of this is a very exciting thing. It shows God's attention to detail. It shows God's desire to speak. He was speaking the whole time about each one of these men and saying, this is who they are. This is what they will do. And what I find interesting is actually, I would challenge you to, now it's not as intense as these two because God like really had a big major mission there. But I would dare say, I can bet if you look at your own life, you look at what's your Torah portion, you look at when you were born, those things, I would venture to say, I'm not going to guarantee, I would venture to say there's a message in there somewhere where God's saying, this is what I have for you in your life. And please pardon an indulgence of mine, but I'm looking at my two sons, and I definitely see that on them. I see it on Binyamin, the first son born to our family since we have actually acknowledged that we are of Jewish lineage, he gets circumcised on the day of the command of circumcision. He is dedicated on the day of the command of dedication. The first son of this family when we said, no, we are Jewish. Boom, boom. Gabrielle, we'll see when he gets here. But her due date, on the day, Purim. So we shall see. And we actually have once again, please pardon indulgence, we have a middle name finally. And that's Nehemiah. He comforts. Comfort my people. So his name will be Hero of God. He comforts. So, and born for such a time as this. So if he shows up at that time, that's going to once again be like, man, God, boys, God be speaking all over the place on you guys. So, but I would challenge, look at those things. Find those things in your life and see. Because, God did this with Yeshua, but it shows that that's how he does things. That's how he speaks. And it's all very exciting. And yes, Michael.
Concerning what you said concerning the prophets,
yes.
in Amos 3:8, I don't do anything without revealing his plan to the prophets.
Yeah, there you go. So anyway, very exciting. I hope this is, if anything, it gave you some points that when people go, well, why don't you do it this way or you do it that way? Now you go, look at the timing. That's why. The timing's wrong. And I've already had someone, I've talked to someone about this, and they're like, I have a friend, he just asked me, why don't you do it here, and when do you do it? And at the time, he's like, I can't get into it right now because I don't have enough time. I was like, I'll get you the paper. You can give it to your friend. He goes, good. I know him. He'll be able to look over that, and it will open his eyes. So it's exciting, but it's also revelatory. So hopefully this can go out and reveal. So let's go ahead and pray. Well, Lord God, first of all, we want to thank you that you do speak. Lord, we do ask that you continue to help us to slow down long enough to hear, to see, and to know, Lord God, so as to know you, whether it be from Scripture or in our own life, Lord God. You make yourself known. It talks about creation speaking of you. How much more humanity who you built for yourself. And Lord, we want to thank you. We want to thank you that we have a Messiah that didn't just come on a random day. We thank you that we had a Messiah that came on a day that from birth it was confirmed he was yours. It was confirmed that was the one you were sending. And that was the one that would save us because he was from you. We thank you for all these parallels, all these connections, and that all this does is excite us about you and bolster our faith in you and in your Son. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.
The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Yevarechek Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav alecha v'chunecha. Isa Adonai panav alecha v'yasem lecha shalom. B'shem Yeshua Mishikenu Adonenu Tzidkenu Yeshuatenu Sar Shalom. In the name of Yeshua, our Messiah, our Lord, our righteousness, our salvation, the Prince of Peace. Amen.